Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Supporting College and Career Readiness Through Advanced Course Taking, Findings from States and Districts. My name is Michelle Hodera, and I will be the facilitator for this webinar, as well as the first presenter. This College and Career Readiness webinar series is a collaboration between regional educational laboratories across the country. There are 10 RELs that serve 10 regions of the country, as you can see from the map. The mission of the RELs is to help improve student outcomes by building policymakers and practitioners' capacity to use data and evidence to address important educational problems. The RELs conduct their research through research alliances, or a group of stakeholders who share a specific educational concern and agree to work together to learn more about the concern so that they can make sound decisions to improve education outcomes. You'll hear about the work of the research alliances throughout the presentation. So there are three goals of this webinar: to understand the link between advanced course taking and students' college readiness and enrollment, examine the characteristics of students who take advanced courses and the context in which they take them, and hear from experts about how advanced course taking in high school is linked to student success. And here's the agenda for the webinar. So you're going to hear first about the promise of advanced course taking, or the benefits, and then which students are taking advanced courses and which are not, then what we know about district implementation, and finally we'll hear from a practitioner about improving advanced course offerings in Eastern Oregon. As you can see, there is a lot of information in this webinar. We would also like to answer audience questions. If we do not get to questions during the webinar, the presenters will stay after the webinar ends and answer your question. Here are the presenters. We have 5 presenters. Myself, Michelle Hodera, I am from REL Northwest. Elizabeth Davis from REL Midwest. John Rice from REL West. Michael Flory from REL Appalachia. And Chris Mulvihill from Intermountain Education Service District in Eastern Oregon. So let's begin with the promise of advanced course taking. So first, let's define what we mean by advanced course taking. So generally, there's a lot of different terms for this, but what we mean is dual credit, where a student gets both high school and college credit for a class taken at their high school. Dual enrollment, where a student gets both college and high school credit for a class taken at the college. Advanced placement and international baccalaureate programs, and other local programs, such as early college high school and other programs states have with very specific names. So why do we care about advanced course taking, and why is it a strategy to increase high school and college graduation? Enrollment in college courses in high school has been found to improve high school graduation, GPA, and overall engagement in high school, as well as college enrollment, persistence, and completion. It is important to note that much of the research on advanced course taking in high school has been correlational, because the studies have not been able to control for all the differences between students who take advanced coursework and those who do not. However, there are a number of studies, and the number is growing, that establish a direct link between advanced course taking and post-secondary outcomes. For example, there are rigorous studies from Florida and Texas that find that taking dual credit courses in specific subject areas, such as math, in the junior or senior year of high school significantly increase students' college enrollment and completion. So I just talked about many of the benefits of advanced course taking, but less is known about the connection between advanced course taking and the likelihood of taking developmental education in college. This was one of the focuses of a study I authored. This study addresses 2 priorities of the Oregon College and Career Readiness Research Alliance, which is a cross-sector group of educational leaders and practitioners from K-12 and higher education in Oregon. First, the Alliance identified developmental education as a priority area after determining that more research was needed to identify gaps in the education pipeline, particularly at the transition from high school to college. This study focuses on developmental education at the 17 Oregon community colleges. So developmental education is also called remediation and includes non-credit bearing courses in math, reading, and writing. So the first question we looked at is, in Oregon, how many high school graduates who attend community college enroll in developmental education? Second, the Alliance requested more information on the relationship between taking dual credit courses, and college readiness and success, because such courses are viewed as a key strategy to improve the transition from high school to college of Oregon students. As a result, this study also examines the relationship between a key experience of Oregon students, participation in dual credit in high school, and subsequent participation in developmental education or college-level coursework at community college, providing the first Oregon-specific evidence on this topic. So in this report, dual credit means lower division collegiate or career and technical education courses articulated with an Oregon community college offered in a high school during regular school hours and taught by approved high school instructors for the purpose of awarding students secondary and post-secondary credit. Let's start with the first question. How many high school graduates who attended community college enrolled in developmental education? Consistent with findings from across the country, developmental education enrollment was more prevalent in developmental math than in reading or writing. And the most common developmental education course overall was Introduction to Algebra. 64% of recent high school graduates from Oregon public high schools took developmental math, and 42% took a developmental reading or writing course. Overall, nearly 3/4, or 73% of high school graduates took a developmental education course in any subject. Now let's look at the answer for the second question. Among graduates who attended community college, what is the connection between taking dual credit in high school and subsequent developmental education enrollment? Many of the factors in this study were related to increasing or decreasing students' likelihood of developmental education enrollment. We looked at the relationship between demographics, socioeconomic status, high school academic experiences, state assessment scores, high school characteristics, and community college attended, and their association with developmental education enrollment. And the factor that had the most consistent relationship with developmental education enrollment was, for all groups of students, was their participation in dual credit in high school. And so what we found was that high school students who took dual credit math and English courses, which are commonly college-level algebra and English composition, were substantially less likely to take developmental education in college. So as expected, recent high school graduates who took dual credit math were 33 percentage points less likely to enroll in developmental math than their peers who did not take dual credit math. And students who took dual credit English were 15 percentage points less likely to enroll in developmental reading and/or writing in college than their peers who did not. So what this means is that all students took dual credit math, rates of developmental math enrollment are predicted to be cut in half from about 64 to 31%, and rates of developmental writing enrollment would be cut from 42 to 27%. Even more informative is that dual credit participation in other subjects was also associated with enrolling in college-level math and English. In English, I talked about the benefits of dual credit English. Recent high school graduates who also took dual credit courses in college math, world languages, social science, history, or business and management were 2 to 7 percentage points less likely to enroll in developmental reading and writing than their peers who did not take those courses in high school. And participation in other subject areas did not have a statistically significant relationship with subsequent enrollment in developmental English. And then similarly, I talked about the benefits of dual credit math for decreasing developmental math enrollment, but there are other subjects as well that had the same relationship. So recent high school graduates who also took a dual credit course in college English, world languages, social science, history, science, industrial and engineering systems, or technology were 2 to 8 percentage points less likely to enroll in developmental math than their peers who did not take those courses. So overall, the study finds that taking a dual credit course in certain academic subjects is associated with lower participation in developmental education. So in addition to college algebra and English composition, some of the most popular dual credit courses in Oregon associated with lower likelihood of taking developmental math and reading or writing include U.S. history, Spanish, and introduction to economics. This suggests that helping students enroll in and succeed in these dual credit courses may present a promising strategy for expanding students' opportunities to engage with challenging college-level material in high school. And also for secondary and post-secondary institutions to work together to align expectations and provide students with a smoother transition from high school to college. At the end of this presentation, Chris Mulvihill will dig deeper into more detailed findings on the benefits of dual credit in Eastern Oregon. But for now, I'm going to move on, and we're going to hear from Elizabeth Davis from REL Midwest about her study.
And thank you so much, Michelle, and great presentation. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. I'm Liz Davis. I'm a senior researcher with REL Midwest at American Institutes for Research. I'm excited to share our work with you today on the characteristics and post-secondary pathways of Minnesota high school graduates who participated in acceleration coursework. And just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today. First, a bit of background on the need for the study. I'm going to talk about our methodology for answering the research questions and some potential implications for the work. So first, a bit of context. There is really a well-documented disconnect between the desire for post-secondary education, plans for post-secondary education, and the reality of completion. When asked, an overwhelming majority of high school seniors report that they do have plans to attend college, but only about 2/3 actually enroll within 2 years. So further, only about 60% of those graduates who do end up enrolling in college actually complete their program within time and a half. And actually, for those who test in the remedial coursework, this figure drops to about 45%. So these districts, they've really been looking for tools and strategies to increase college readiness among high school students. So acceleration programs are really one strong strategy that districts and states have adopted to increase college readiness and reduce that gap between college plans and completion. And as Michelle talked about earlier, participation in acceleration coursework is really a very effective strategy for increasing college readiness. Previous studies have really they've positively linked participation in these courses with completing high school, enrolling and persisting in college, and completing a degree. So acceleration programs are also a very central part of Minnesota's strategy for college readiness and success. In addition to advanced placements and international baccalaureate coursework, students have the opportunity for post-secondary enrollment options, or PSEO, where high school students take college-level coursework either on college campuses or online, and they also have the opportunity for concurrent enrollment coursework, where college-level courses are taken at the high school and taught by a trained high school teacher. So these offerings are really quite popular among high school students. In the year that we studied, 21% of 11th and 12th graders were participating in PSEO, and they did so in over 100 colleges. And also during that time, 24 colleges were working with 350 high schools to provide concurrent enrollment coursework to more than 21,000 students. Also, almost a quarter of the high school students participated in AP coursework, and about 2% were participating in IB programs. So despite their popularity, we really have limited information on the accessibility and post-secondary pathways of participants. And the information that we did have was often based on data from national samples or other states. And the Minnesota Office of Higher Ed really needed and wanted to document the types of students participating in and succeeding in these programs, as well as their post-secondary pathways and outcomes. So REL Midwest partnered with the Minnesota Office of Higher Education to conduct a study, and this is actually the first use of the new statewide longitudinal education data system, or SLED. So turning to our methods, our primary data source was SLEDs, as I said before. We obtained all of our student-level data from SLEDs, and we also obtained college-level data from there as well. We got publicly available high school-level data from the Minnesota Department of Education website and the Elementary and Secondary Information System, which are more commonly known as Common Core of Data. And we also looked at college-level data on selectivity from Barron's profile of American colleges. So looking at our sample, we used all public Minnesota high school graduates from 2011, which was about 60,000 students. And, you know, our research questions really centered around who is participating, at what rate are they being awarded this credit in college, what types of colleges are they actually enrolling in, what are their post-secondary outcomes, and does the award of credit matter as far as post-secondary outcomes is concerned. We collected a lot of data. We used a lot of data, 4 different types. We looked at participation. We had 5 types of programs we looked at. We looked at advanced placement, international baccalaureate, PSEO, and concurrent enrollment, and then we actually ended up with an other category for programs like one-on-one articulation agreements between districts and colleges that may not have been subsidized by the states. We looked at characteristics of students, high schools, and colleges, such as demographics and academics, SES, that kind of thing. We looked at the credits awarded by the students' colleges of enrollment for the coursework that they took while those students were still in high school. And we also looked at 3 types of post-secondary outcomes related to enrollment, measured by when and where they enrolled in a college within Minnesota. We looked at their college readiness, which was measured by whether or not they took remedial coursework in their first semester of college. And then we also looked at college persistence, which is just basically returning for a second year of college. And then we answered these research questions using descriptive statistics and a series of 2-level hierarchical logistic regression models. So as for our findings, this study is still under review by IES, and we anticipate the report being published in late December. But the best way to stay informed on really all things REL, including when reports are published, is to sign up for IES Newsflash. I've got the URL here on the slide, and I believe it's going to be posted in the chat box too if you're interested in signing up for that. And while I can't really discuss the findings yet, I can talk a little bit about the potential implications of this work for Minnesota and other states. So one of the purposes of this study was to gain a better understanding of what types of students are participating in these programs and to get a better sense of to what extent colleges are accepting those credits once they get there. And the results from this study can really help target resources to specific student subgroups who may be underrepresented in this area but may benefit from participation in these programs. These results are also going to help Minnesota plan future program offerings by shedding light on where those needs might be. And then knowing what student subgroups need more support can actually help other states too. For example, Indiana just released their own study on dual credit that was modeled after this study. And then finally, the results really have potential to influence state policy related to acceleration coursework and the transfer of credit at the college level and equitable access to acceleration programs. So thank you. That's all I have. I need to now turn things over to John Rice from REL West. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I am John Rice, Senior Research Associate at REL West. And my piece of this webinar is about some work we conducted in Clark County School District in Southern Nevada that examined advanced course completion in comprehensive high schools and magnet high schools. Clark County School District is the 5th largest school district in the country with approximately 350 schools and 320,000 students. And Nevada has one of the lowest high school graduation rates in the country, and students from its high schools have high remediation rates when they enter college. So understandably, districts in Nevada, like Clark County, are concerned about graduation rates and the college readiness of its graduates. So in Clark County, one strategy for preparing students for college was to increase the exposure of all students to advanced courses before they graduated high school. And prior to this specific piece of work I'm going to talk about, we provided some findings to Clark County regarding advanced course taking and the differences between various subgroups. And one of the things we found is that the likelihood of completing advanced courses was different at different types of high schools. And as you can see in this exhibit, across all 4 types of advanced courses, more students in magnet high schools completed at least one of these courses compared to students in comprehensive high schools. So Clark County was wondering, well, why these disparities in the advanced course completion exist. And it may, of course, be because there are simply more high-achieving students who attend magnet high schools compared to comprehensive high schools. So naturally, you would expect to find these differences in advanced course taking. But Clark County was also wondering if there was something else going on. They were wondering if there was something in addition to the larger number of high-achieving students enrolled in magnet schools that could explain this finding. For example, Clark County was wondering if there were differences in the practices or policies in magnet high schools that might foster greater enrollment in and completion of advanced courses, or maybe there were unique instructional supports or resources that magnet school students received when they enrolled in advanced courses. And of course, there are a number of other possibilities as well, but those were the ones that they were most interested in. So this is something that the research questions that we focused on were these. The first was, is there a relationship between the type of high school attended and the likelihood of having completed an advanced course after students' prior achievement is accounted for? And the second question was, does the strength of the relationship between the type of high school attended and the likelihood of having completed an advanced course differ by students' prior achievement? So this is what we did to answer those questions. We examined the entire high school course-taking record from all 4 years of high school enrollment for about 26,000 recent graduates from Clark County. And using hierarchical logistic regression models, we examined the likelihoods of completing a course in Honors English, Honors Math, Advanced Placement English, and Advanced Placement Math as a function of prior achievement and type of high school attended. Now this exhibit and the next 3 are going to show you what we found. The findings are displayed as this type of curve known as an S-curve. And for example, in this first exhibit, the curves show that as prior achievement in reading increased, so did the likelihood of completing an advanced honors ELA course. The curves also show that graduates of magnet high schools were more likely than graduates of comprehensive high schools to complete an honors ELA course, and that this was above and beyond the influence of prior achievement. And this is seen in that the blue line, which represents magnet schools, is significantly higher than the black line, which represents comprehensive high schools. And also, I should say that for all these analyses I'm discussing, we accounted for English language learner status, IEP status, and race ethnicity of the students, and we still have the same findings. Now, this exhibit shows the findings for honors math courses. And in this case, after accounting for students' prior achievement, graduates of magnet high schools were no more likely than graduates of comprehensive high schools to complete an honors math course. So here what you're seeing is that even though the blue curve, which represents magnet high schools, is higher than the black curve representing comprehensive high schools, the difference between the type of school attended is not statistically significant. Now, for advanced placement courses, things get more interesting and a little more complicated. Here the curves representing magnet and comprehensive high schools cross each other. So this means that there was an influence of the type of school attended, but the influence depended on the level of prior achievement of the student. So for example, and you see this at the right end of the curves, in comprehensive schools, higher achieving students are more likely than lower achieving students to complete an AP ELA course. But in magnet schools, higher achieving students are less likely than lower achieving students to complete an AP ELA course. So by the magnet school curve being less steep than the comprehensive school curve, it shows that something about magnet schools or the students attending them reduces the influence of prior achievement on AP ELA course completion. And we see the same findings for AP math courses. That is, there's an influence of the type of school, but as you can see, the influence depends on the level of prior achievement of the student. Again, magnet high schools, or something about the students attending magnet high schools, reduces the influence of prior achievement on AP math course completion. So I have a finding slide, but essentially the findings are a recapitulation of what I showed you. So I'll go to the possible explanations. One is that there are characteristics unique to magnets or comprehensive schools that are influencing the completion rates of advanced course taking. And these factors could be as simple as course availability or such things as one type of school more effectively getting the word out to families and students about advanced course opportunities, or even magnet schools perhaps providing more academic supports once their students enroll in advanced courses. Another explanation, of course, is that there are simply differences in the students and their families who enroll in magnet versus comprehensive high schools, and these might include such things as motivational differences as well as differences in resources and supports that are found in the home. But as far as the implications of things we found in Clark County, there's three main ones, and I'll briefly go over them. One is that districts might want to examine differences between their schools in terms of the policies and procedures for advanced course enrollment and supports once students enroll in those courses. Another implication for districts is that they should look beyond the academic and demographic differences of students who enroll in and do not enroll in their advanced courses if their goal is to try to increase the proportion of students who experience advanced courses. And finally, if there are differences between types of schools in terms of advanced course taking and completion, districts might consider policies or practices that make students' likelihood of completing advanced courses less dependent on the type of school they're attending in the district. So that's kind of a summary of what we did, and appreciate you listening. And now I will pass things on to Michael Flory from REL Appalachia.
Okay, thank you. So I will talk a little bit about some work that we did in the state of Kentucky, looking at specifically dual enrollment and dual credit as one type of advanced coursework. So I'm Michael Flory. I am a research scientist with the REL Appalachia. I actually coordinate our alliance and partnership that we have in the state of Kentucky. A little bit about them because they're really the drivers for the work. The partnership is with 7 of the regionally based educational cooperatives, which represent the bulk of the districts in the state. There are only about 15 or 20 districts that are not represented by these cooperatives. Also partner with some state-level partners, Department of Education, Council on Post-Secondary Ed, because it's very important to get their feedback and understand what are their questions around these topics. So a little bit of background on what's been happening in Kentucky with respect to dual enrollment and dual credit in the past 5 or 7 years. And it's been a priority here for several years. There was fairly landmark legislation back in 2009, referred to locally here as Senate Bill 1, that made officially college and career readiness one of the main goals and main outcomes that the education system was going to be driving towards. There were several different policies put in place, lots of different programs put in place across the time since then. The Kentucky Department of Education has focused on college and career readiness through some of its delivery goals and its strategic planning. Council on Post-Secondary Ed has revised some dual credit policies within the past year or so, which are just now going into effect. And so there's really been a coherent statewide effort to expand opportunities around dual enrollment and dual credit. So what did REL Appalachia do? Why were we interested, or why were our partners interested? We actually did 2 separate studies. They were conducted simultaneously. The advantage of that is you can get the results out much faster. One of the disadvantages is you don't necessarily have time to cycle back and use the learning from one to inform the second because they happened at the same time. But we had 2 studies, both of them just very descriptive, looking at what's going on. The first was a statewide quantitative study. We looked at how many students were enrolled, what types of students, where are they enrolled, what types of courses are they taking, very much counting and trying to understand who's in the courses. The second study that we did was a deeper dive into 6 non-urban districts. 5 were rural, 1 was, I believe, suburban, to try to understand better their approaches to implementing these courses. Because that was the question we kept hearing was, how do you make these happen? So I'll go through the first study really quickly and then get a little bit more into the details of the second and what's going on in the state. So statewide participation, we found that about 1 in 5, right around 20% of Kentucky students in grades 11 and 12 each year at a given time are enrolled in a dual enrollment course. In Kentucky, that's around 16,000 students because you have around 80,000 students in grades 11 and 12 collectively. You see some differences in the distribution. Rural areas have a higher participation rate. Students who are not eligible for free and reduced lunch have a higher participation rate, and white students have a higher participation rate than racial minorities or ethnic minorities. Completion rates. In this particular case, we define completion as students who received a D or better. We know a D may not always count for something down the road in college, but it certainly counts for high school, and it, in some cases, does count towards credits for college. So these were students who completed the courses that they attempted. And statewide, and this is on average across about the years 2010 to 2012, it's right around 85% of the students who attempted a course passed that course. Again, you see some distribution here. Rural students actually passed at higher rates, even though they participated at higher rates also, which is kind of interesting. Then you see some of our traditional achievement gaps that you see in other situations. They show up here as well, that students who are eligible for free or reduced price lunch or minorities end up completing at lower rates than other students. We also looked at where these courses occur. There's a lot going on in these graphs. However, I'm not going to go into all the details for interest of time, but certainly if you have questions later, we can talk about them later. But where the courses occur, the things I want to point out here are that while online is not a high percentage of the courses, it's certainly a growing percentage and a growing number of courses are offered online for dual enrollment. There's certainly been a large increase in the number of high school courses offered at the high school for dual enrollment and dual credit in Kentucky. There were some policy changes in 2012-13 that affected overall enrollment, and so you see some dips at some of those others. Those are largely career tech ed courses there at the post-secondary or other campuses. And like I said, we can talk about those at another time or if you have questions later to get into those. So that's kind of where courses are happening, who's taking them, who's completing them. So what we really wanted to do was dive deeper into how non-urban districts are able to offer these courses if you're not actually near a campus. So we worked to identify 6 districts. We worked with the co-ops. They gave us kind of a range, geographically speaking, in terms of the experience level of these districts with dual enrollment, size of the districts, lots of different variables. And then one of the things that I'll differentiate here is previously I was talking about all dual enrollment in general. And here, because of what the interviewees chose to focus on, it's academic general ed courses, not CTE. So some common features that we saw were that regardless of how new some of these districts were to dual enrollment or where they were located, all 6 of these said that dual enrollment was a central feature to their college readiness efforts. We also found that all of them needed multiple partners, both 2-year and 4-year colleges and universities within each district to offer the full complement of academic dual enrollment courses that they wanted to offer. We also found that predominantly these are taught at the high school by high school teachers. That's not what you saw on the graph a minute ago statewide. But for these rural districts, the courses basically are at the high school by high school teachers who are credentialed for college. And we also heard pretty universally a limited availability of credentialed teachers. Different states do credentialing differently. This is one of the requirements in Kentucky is that they have 18 graduate credit hours in a content area, which makes it difficult for a lot of teachers to get the certification that they want and need. We also saw a lot of variation both across the districts, which you may expect, different size, different location, but also a lot of variation within districts. As far as the dual enrollment programming goes, we saw everything from single programs, singleton courses is what they're referred to in the literature, basically individual one-off courses with no specific external support, up through complex early college programs that may begin as early as 9th grade that include transition course, transition skills, life learning skills, and transportation to the campuses. We saw a wide variety in the number of courses that are offered. One district offered 8 courses, another district offered 40 courses, but where it was especially interesting to me was that within a district, if you had 3 or 4 high schools, the high schools frequently operated independently of each other. And so you might see one high school that had 11 dual enrollment courses and another high school across town that offered 28 dual enrollment courses. Costs, again, wide variation here, frequently borne by the students, however, also sometimes borne by the districts or the universities. It depends on the agreements that they have in place. The districts are able to subsidize these in various ways. And this is actually a finding that this year is changing because of some new policies that are in place and some statewide funds to try to make access a little bit more equitable and the cost of access more equitable. So what seemed to be working? All of the districts, we don't have any way to verify this. We didn't go back and check against outcomes, but the districts cited that if you had dedicated staff to manage the programs, especially at the post-secondary level, and it wasn't just something that a faculty member was trying to do on top of their regular duties, that really helped. Positive relationships, ongoing communication were very important and seemed to lead to stronger or were related with stronger programs. And unfortunately, one we can't really control is geographic proximity. So if you're close to a college, it seemed to be easier to do a dual enrollment program than if you were far away. There are certainly still some creative solutions that we need to expand the program and ensure high quality down the road. We already talked about instructor access and credentialing. If your location in general, course completion for students from high poverty schools seem to be an issue that needs to be addressed in the future. Affordability, which Kentucky is already looking into. Course quality measures. I didn't say much about this, but it was something that was left fairly locally and not a lot of oversight from the colleges, which leads to just questions, nothing necessarily wrong or right about it, but just certainly further questions about, are we still ensuring the rigor of courses as we also increase access and opportunity?